My INFJ friend, being an INFJ isn't just about being rare. It's about operating with a completely different internal operating system. When you've been using your entire life without anyone ever handing you the manual, you've probably been told you're too sensitive, too intense, or too quiet. You've likely wondered why you feel like you're running emotional calculus while everyone else is doing basic math. Why you walk into rooms and instantly know what's wrong before a single word is spoken. Here's the truth: most personality content never touches. You are not wired for surface living. You are wired for depth, foresight, and transformation. This video isn't about flattering you with mysticism or vague praise. We're naming what's actually happening. We're breaking down the 10 hidden superpowers you've been using instinctively: emotional X-ray vision, pattern detection, silent influence, meaning-making, and why they make you a quiet force in a loud world. You don't dominate rooms. You alter trajectories. And once you see these abilities clearly, you stop trying to become louder, faster, or simpler and start becoming dangerously aligned. If something in this video hits close to home, leave a comment. I read them and I reply. Subscribe if you want more grounded, soul-centered insight like this. Now, let's name what you've been doing all along. INFJs don't just notice emotions. You see through them. You register the hesitation before the sentence finishes. You feel the emotional temperature of a room before anyone speaks. You sense when words are technically correct, but energetically dishonest. It's not dramatic, it's precise. You catch micro shifts in tone, the way someone's voice tightens on a single word. You notice posture, pacing, eye contact, withdrawal. You read what's missing as clearly as what's present. This isn't imagination or overthinking. It's perception sharpened by intuition and empathy working in tandem. Your mind is constantly scanning for coherence. Do their emotions match their story? Does their energy align with their intent? And when it doesn't, your body knows instantly. That's why you can tell when someone's "I'm fine" is absolute bullshit. That's why you feel uneasy around people others trust. That's why you recognize pain long before it becomes visible. You notice who's performing for approval, who's armoring themselves behind humor, who's quietly breaking while holding it together for everyone else. Most people never realize you're doing this. You're not staring. You're not interrogating. You're simply aware. And here's the part you consistently underestimate. You influence people without trying. You don't argue to convince. You don't dominate with logic or volume. You don't push your way into being right. You hold a presence that makes people slow down. Your silence isn't empty, it's spacious. It invites reflection. It makes people hear themselves more clearly. When you speak, you don't flood conversations with opinions. You offer a single, well-placed insight and let it land. Your pauses carry weight because you're not scrambling to fill space. Your questions open doors because they're not designed to trap. They're designed to reveal. Your calm disarms defensiveness because you're not trying to win. People leave conversations with you feeling subtly altered, not convinced, not controlled, but shifted. You plant ideas like seeds, quietly, deliberately, and then you walk away. Weeks later, someone will come to you saying, "I had this realization," and you'll recognize it instantly. You sparked it. That's silent persuasion. It's influence without force, leadership without dominance, power without performance. The downside? You're often unaware of how much impact you're having because you don't see influence unless it's loud. So you minimize yourself. You assume you're forgettable. You think your presence doesn't matter as much as it does. But people remember how they felt around you. They remember the moment something clicked. They remember the calm, the clarity, the sense of being understood, even if they never name you as the catalyst. Where have you already influenced outcomes simply by being present, without raising your voice, defending yourself, or forcing understanding? The INFJ mind doesn't live in the present moment alone. It stretches backward and forward at the same damn time. While others are reacting to what just happened, you're already connecting it to what happened before and quietly projecting where it's heading next. You don't just see what is. You see what's forming. You notice cycles before they repeat. You recognize themes before they become problems. You track behavior across time, not isolated moments, but trajectories. You remember how someone handled stress 3 years ago, how a system failed under pressure before, how a pattern always resolves when certain conditions align. And your brain stores this information not as a list, but as a living map. That's why your knowing doesn't arrive step by step. It arrives whole, a feeling in your gut, a tightening in your chest, a quiet inner voice saying, "This isn't going where you think it is." You struggle to explain it because it's not linear. There's no single data point you can point to, it's convergence. 10 small signals clicking together at once. So you say things like, "Something feels off. I don't trust this. I think this is going to end badly." And people look at you like you're being dramatic. They ask for proof. They want timelines, logic, bullet points. But your insight doesn't come from isolated facts. It comes from pattern continuity. You're reading the story, not the sentence. This is why you often pull away early. From relationships, from jobs, from situations that look fine on the surface. And later, painfully, quietly, you discover you were right. The cracks widened. The behavior escalated. The system collapsed exactly where you sensed it would. That's emotional forecasting. You don't just feel what someone is feeling now. You feel where that emotion is heading if nothing changes. You sense resentment before it becomes hostility. Burnout before it becomes collapse. Dishonesty before it becomes betrayal. This ability is meant to protect you. But here's the knife twist. When you don't trust it, it turns inward. You start questioning yourself, second-guessing your instincts, explaining away your own perception because you don't want to seem paranoid, judgmental, or too sensitive. You override your internal warning system to keep the peace. To be fair, to give one more chance, and that's when the damage happens. Not because your intuition was wrong, but because you ignored it. You weren't overthinking. You weren't imagining things. You weren't being negative. You were seeing ahead. This superpower isn't about predicting the future like a fortune teller. It's about recognizing momentum, where energy is flowing, where it's stagnating, where it's building pressure behind a dam that will eventually break. The work for you isn't sharpening this ability, it's honoring it, learning when to act on it without needing external validation, learning to trust your timing even when others don't see the threat yet, because by the time they do, you've already lived it internally. Where in your life did you sense an outcome long before it happened, and what might change if you trusted that knowing sooner next time? People tell you things they don't tell anyone else? Not because you interrogate, not because you demand intimacy, but because when they sit with you, something in them exhales. You don't just listen with your ears, you listen with your posture, your silence, your attention that doesn't flinch when things get messy. You don't rush people toward solutions. You don't interrupt their grief with optimism. You don't minimize their pain with cliches. You let them unfold. And in a world addicted to speed fixing and performance, that is rare as hell. This is deep witnessing. You reflect people back to themselves without distortion. You catch the emotions beneath their words. You notice what they avoid saying, and you don't force it out of them. That's why people feel seen in a way they can't quite explain. They walk away lighter, clearer, sometimes shaken because you held up a mirror they didn't know they were ready to look into. And often, you didn't say much at all. Your presence did the work. But here's the quieter superpower hiding underneath that one. You calm chaos. When emotions spike, you ground. When conversations escalate, you slow them down. When a room fills with tension, your nervous system instinctively shifts into regulation mode. You become the emotional thermostat. Others panic, you breathe. Others spiral, you anchor. Others fracture, you hold coherence. This isn't because life has been gentle with you. It's because it hasn't. You've lived through emotional intensity. You've sat with discomfort long enough to know it's not going to kill you. So when chaos shows up, you don't run, you make space. That's why people gravitate toward you in crisis. They feel safer thinking clearly around you. They feel permission to soften. They feel like they can finally be honest without being punished for it. But let's talk about the cost, because there is one. You often regulate others before regulating yourself. You absorb tension that was never yours. You stay calm for everyone else while ignoring your own exhaustion. You become the container and forget you also need one. And over time, that turns into quiet burnout. Not explosive, not dramatic. Just a slow erosion of energy, boundaries, and self-attention. Here's the truth you may not have been told. That's not weakness. That's untrained power. Your ability to stabilize emotional environments is immense, but without conscious limits, it drains you. You were never meant to be everyone's nervous system. You were meant to teach regulation by example, not sacrifice yourself to it. The work here isn't to stop being who you are. It's to include yourself in the care you so freely give. To ask, do I have the capacity for this right now? Is this mine to hold? Who holds space for me when I'm the one unraveling? Because the same presence that heals others can heal you too, if you let it turn inward. Who feels safest around you, and how often do you offer yourself that same safety? 4. Your quiet power. Storytelling and meaning-making. INFJ don't just experience pain, you process it. You sit with it long enough for it to speak. Where others try to outrun discomfort, you instinctively ask, what is this here to teach me? You don't waste suffering, even when it nearly breaks you. This is meaning-making. You alchemize lived experience into understanding. Heartbreak becomes clarity. Loss becomes discernment. Confusion becomes a story that makes sense of the chaos. This is why you're drawn to writing, teaching, guiding, mentoring, creating. You are a translator of the unseen, taking what is felt but unspoken and giving it language. You don't tell stories to entertain. You tell them to heal, to orient, to help others recognize themselves in the mirror of your insight. You intuitively know that pain without meaning hardens people, but pain integrated with purpose becomes wisdom. That's why people often say, I don't know why, but what you said helped. You didn't minimize their struggle. You placed it inside a larger frame. And then there's your foresight, the quiet, steady ability to hold the long view when everything feels unstable. When others panic, you slow down. When emotions spike, you widen the lens. When people spiral into urgency, you remind them that this moment is not the whole story. This is vision anchoring. You don't react to the loudest emotion in the room. You orient to trajectory. You sense where things are heading, not just emotionally, but existentially. You ask questions like, what does this lead to? Who will this shape us into? What are we building, even unintentionally? And because of that, people lean on you during uncertainty. Not because you promise easy answers, but because you don't collapse under pressure. You anchor, not by force, not by control, but by presence. You remind people who they are when they forget. You help them remember their values when fear tries to rewrite them. You hold continuity when everything else feels like it's unraveling. The shadow side? You sometimes forget that anchors also need rest. You stay strong so others can fall apart. You hold vision while quietly postponing your own healing. You become the lighthouse, but rarely dock your own ship. Here's the reframe you may need. Your role is not to carry everyone forever. It's to model integration, pain transformed, not buried. Your wisdom doesn't diminish when you step back. It deepens. How has your pain shaped your capacity to guide others? And where are you still allowed to tend to your own? 5. These are not traits. These are your superpowers. INFJ don't stand for everything. And that's intentional. You have a finely tuned internal compass, one that doesn't bend easily under pressure, trends, or convenience. You may question yourself endlessly, but when it comes to values, you are immovable. This is moral clarity. You can sense when something is off ethically, emotionally, spiritually, even if you can't immediately articulate why. You feel misalignment in your body before your mind catches up. That's why you struggle in environments that ask you to compromise integrity for approval. Why shallow ambition exhausts you? Why just go along with it? Feels like a betrayal of self. You'd rather walk alone than live out of alignment. And yes, that has cost you things. Belonging, ease, opportunities that required silence where your soul demanded truth. But here's what it's also given you: credibility, depth, a sense of self that doesn't dissolve under pressure. When you speak, people feel that you mean it, because you don't perform values, you live them. And when you choose someone or something, that's where your final superpower comes online. Transformational loyalty. You don't attach lightly. You don't commit halfway. You don't give your devotion casually. But when you do, you invest in growth, not just comfort. You believe in people's potential and their responsibility to rise. You stay present through transformation, not just stability. You don't abandon at the first sign of difficulty, but you also don't tolerate betrayal of core values. This kind of loyalty changes people. It calls them higher. It invites accountability. It creates bonds that aren't transactional, they're evolutionary. The danger? When your loyalty outpaces reciprocity. When you stay committed to people or systems that drain rather than grow. When your endurance turns into self-erasure. These powers were never meant to be automatic. They were meant to be wielded consciously. You are not here to give everything to everyone. You are here to give the right things to the right places. What changes when you stop downplaying what you are and start choosing where your power belongs? My INFJ friend, you were never meant to blend in. You were built to see beneath, feel deeply, and shape reality quietly from the inside out. Your power doesn't shout. It resonates. It lingers. It changes people after the conversation is over. Once you stop trying to be louder and start being truer, everything recalibrates. Your insight sharpens. Your energy returns. Your influence lands where it's meant to. If this spoke to something deep and familiar inside you, I'd genuinely love to hear your story. Leave a comment. I read them, and I reply. Share this with someone who needs to recognize their quiet power. And subscribe if you want more soul-centered, no bullshit insight like this. You were never ordinary. You were always powerful. You're just finally learning how to stand inside it. You're not just rare. You're necessary.